Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and I am here today for another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted. And today I have Jeff Glauser. And I think Jeff and I, didn't we meet on LinkedIn, Jeff?
We met on LinkedIn through, I think, a mutual connection, and then a budding friendship took off from there. So it was a beautiful thing.
Yes, absolutely. I usually don't read bios, but Jeff's is succinct because he is a storyteller and he knows how to captivate audiences. So I'm going to read his bio and then I'll say a proper hello to Jeff. With over 20 years experience in professional writing, higher education, sales and marketing, Jeff Glosser knows a little something about rebranding. As an accomplished journalist and screenwriter, he also knows a little something about storytelling. As the founder of Brandscribed, Jeff helps people clarify their message, captivate their audience, and create legacy leaving stories. So, Jeff, I give you a hearty welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michelle. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I want to start with the first thing that you say in your bio, and I just want to kind of break down your bio to get some information and some stories since you're a storyteller. So you talk about knowing a little something, and I know that is such a play on words because you know so much about it. But tell me about rebranding. Say if a company comes to you and says, yeah, we've been doing the same logo, we've had the same tagline, the same vision statement for 10 years, and we want to rebrand, but we don't know what direction to go. How would you help that company?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question that I've gotten a lot, Michelle. And really, the first thing that you need to do is get to the heart of the matter and really kind of identify what is the backstory that led them to this particular conversation. So, as you had alluded to in my own bio, I have done my share of rebranding, and not necessarily by design. So, when I first began my career path, I felt like I was pretty clear as far as the direction that I was going to take. So I went to school for journalism. I was always big in sports and entertainment, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about that. Initially, I wanted to become an athlete, but by the time I got to high school, I realized that that wasn't genetically in the cards. So the next best thing to do if I couldn't play it professionally would be to write about it. But looking back, life has a way of happening, also off script. And I also realized that I had a bit of chase the shiny object syndrome. So whenever an opportunity came around that seemed to be illuminating, for lack of a better word, I sought out to pursue it. And I had this YOLO mentality, this you only live once mentality of, all right, well, if there's a chance to have a life experience, AKA a story that I can incorporate into my own journey, especially as I'm younger, I might as well do it. So they say the best laid plans, right? And the intentions were great. So right out of undergrad, I had an opportunity to travel for a couple years as a leadership consultant and see the country, and visit over 100 different schools, and go to some amazing events. And that was great. And that was 2 years. Well, after that, I had no intention of going back to grad school until I visited over 100 schools and went back to school. And, especially with the economy the way that it was at that point, there was another 2 years. So I went to film school because that was another thing that I was passionate about. And if I went to grad school for journalism, it just felt redundant to me. It felt like, well, unless I'm going to be teaching that, it doesn't make sense. Well, spoiler alert, I wound up teaching years later too. But did film school, and now, I'm 26 years old. I haven't necessarily, quote unquote, started an actual career yet. And now I finally start seeing some of these pieces laying together. That's when I leaned into the journalism career for a while. Then around that time, and they say timing is everything, print started giving way to digital, and websites started taking over for the actual hard copy of a newspaper. And there was a lot of positions in flux, including my own, because of that circumstance. So spent a bunch of time freelancing, went back to my screenwriting roots for a little bit and enjoyed that too. I was just, for lack of a better word, I was dabbling. I was just trying to figure out, okay, where is my inciting incident? When is everything just going to kind of kick off and give me the clarity that I needed? So I was teaching, I was writing, and also my personal life. I was beginning a relationship and starting a family, and the adjunct professor slash freelance writer slash part-time do whatever to make ends meet thing wasn't necessarily cutting it from a stability standpoint for my family. So I decided to do the quote unquote responsible thing and pivoted into sales and marketing, where I was in that realm for the better part of the next 10 years, primarily in the reputation management space, where it felt like, okay, there is some relevance here because I'm working with a lot of professional athletes and a lot of people in entertainment, and I'm working within the media and I'm working in stories. But from the reality of it is that I was answering to ownership and reporting and having my staff answer to me, basically wondering why we weren't able to deliver on a consistent basis. So, here I am basically telling my team, pay no attention to the elephant in the room, just keep your head down and grind, trying to appease ownership and trying to play the middleman. And it was very disenfranchising, to say the least. To the point where I woke up on my 42nd birthday uh, to a panic attack. Talk about your ultimate wake up call. And if that wasn't kind of a an eye-opening moment, then I don't know what else was. But it was basically me looking back and wondering, how the heck did I get here? Like, where did the time go? How did I, dabble in this and dabble in that, and just not be able to put all those pieces together in such a way where I felt fulfilled? I certainly had a level of success in all these roles, and I certainly was able to have, a comfortable, living for, for the most part. But I wasn't satisfied. I, as the hero of my own story, allegedly, was feeling like I was just kind of wandering down this aimless road, and trying to figure out how I can get back on track. So all of that to say, it was a long-winded response to say that when others approach me, I look for their how did I get here moment. Okay.
Yes.
So, you had mentioned the analogy of, all right, well, this is a company that has been doing what they've been doing the same way for the last 10 years. And then one day they wake up to their own business panic attack, if you will, and wondering, okay, how come our business has plateaued? How come we're spinning our wheels? How come we're not engaging our clients the way that we used to before? Because we're doing what we did before that was working. Well, if you always do what you always done, you're always going to get what you always had, or worse. It's not going to improve because everyone else is just going to be keeping up with the times and improving on their own. So, the most important thing to do is, one, figure out where you went off script, where you went off your storyline and off your journey, and then identify where those breadcrumbs are that can lead you back on that trail. So, utilizing some of these past hats that I had worn, whether it be as a journalist and asking the right questions to get to the heart of the matter, or whether it be as a teacher and a professor, where we try to figure out how to find those teachable moments where they can kind of, take the accountability back and figure out, okay, this is my audience. This is what they want. This is what's keeping them from getting what they want. And this is how I can come in as that solution provider, that pain solver, and finally have that sense of purpose that we've been lacking for a long time now. And then from there, we start connecting those beats. So just like putting an actual story together, it works the same way when you're talking about a brand. Okay. You figure out, all right, well, where's beginning, middle, and end? Where's your happily ever after? How do we reverse engineer to get there? And then where are those missing pieces that we can collaboratively and collectively kind of figure out along the way? And when everything is done, we have what I like to call a brand script, where it hits all those beats and essentially serves as this manifesto of sorts, of your own story and your own messaging, that becomes this gift that keeps on giving. That once you have this clarity of, all right, this is my audience. This is what they need. This is how I'm uniquely qualified to provide it. And then these are the scenes and the acts, if you will, that I need to guide them through along the way. Everything else now becomes this sense of fulfillment because you now have that sense of direction that you might have missed along the way.
Yeah, that is so excellent. And I want to kind of piggyback on your answer to just say, okay, you answered the company's question. Is it always necessary to, when a company wants to rebrand, is it always necessary to do a complete overhaul? Like you're saying, find out where, find out the why, the when, the how, or sometimes is it just a slight shift of the company? Is it always, do they need a brand new logo? Do they need new tagline? Do they need new everything? Or can you work with parts of what they've had or not?
You can absolutely work with parts. Yeah, that's a fantastic question because it does not have to be a zero sum game. It's not an all or nothing scenario. And what we might realize through kind of, having this audit of their messaging, of their content, is that I like to say big doors swing on small hinges. I love that phrase. And sometimes it's this little tiny component, this little tiny piece that's holding up all of these other components that would have allowed this machine, to flow much better. So yeah, it very well could be these slight little tweaks that might not necessarily require this overhaul, which I believe, to your point, Michelle, is why a lot of businesses and even a lot of individuals are afraid of that word rebrand because of what they believe goes into it. It's like, oh my goodness, it's going to cost so much, money and take
Yes.
so much time and all this energy. And, I mean, and then they start justifying not even, considering it. Well, you know what? I'm staying afloat. Good enough is good enough. I'm not, I'm not in the doldrums yet, and I'm not on the brink of bankruptcy, so I'll live with it. But knowing deep down inside, or perhaps not that deep down, this isn't this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like the purpose driven story that I wanted to put out there all along, or what I intended it to be like when I first began. So, having that understanding that perhaps it could be something as, as I don't want to say trivial, but as small as, changing a name or a moniker, or just kind of rejiggering the actual niche of the audience. Maybe you have to niche down, maybe you have to niche back up, but there could be just some sort of slight adjustment that doesn't force you to just scrap everything. And by just giving yourself the permission to sit down and be open and honest and have a sounding board with someone such as myself that can prompt you and trigger you into having those epiphanies and revelations that might not have been able to occur on your own, because as we know, sometimes we're just a little too inside of it to kind of figure things out, and it requires that outside perspective. That could be all the help that you need to finally kind of get out of your own way.
Yeah, that is so true. And I have lived that as well with my business with I call myself a recovering ghostwriter because I
Mm.
was a ghostwriter for maybe 6 years. And I don't think I was particularly fabulous at it, but I fell out of love with my business. It just kind of started sucking the life out of me. And I was in, like you said, that outside perspective. I was in some kind of networking online group, and the lady who was talking said, sometimes you just have to shift 15 degrees or to the right or to the left to fall back in love with your business. And you know what? I did exactly what you are saying that you help your clients with. And I just thought, what are the parts that I loved to do while I was ghostwriting? It was the connecting, it was the coordinating. And I thought, you know what? There are plenty of people who love to ghostwrite. Let them operate in their zone of genius, and I will do what I'm really gifted at. And so, what you say is so true because I've lived it. And you know what? I fell back in love with my business. I love what I do. And that was in the, I don't know, 2021, maybe 2021. And now it's
Mhm.
2025. So, what you are
Mhm.
saying works because you just have to do that deep dive. You just have to, sometimes it's a total rebrand. Sometimes that's called for. Sometimes it is that shift, like you said, just a little bit. We can use this piece and this piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And but either way, and so well put, Michelle, but either way, what we can't do if we do want to see this to fruition is bury our heads in the sand and just hope that that revelation will come to us. It's like just hold out hope, hold out faith, and then before you know it, you blink and it's 10 years later and you wake up to a panic attack, as mentioned. So I would highly encourage that whenever someone starts having that moment of unease, it's like, all right, something doesn't feel right. The types of responses I was getting in the beginning are not the types of responses that I'm getting now. Where is that disconnect? That's the time to start exploring that and to find out what it sounds like you found out, Michelle, which is that what is my ultimate why? You
Yes.
were in like your act three moment, I like to say, where it's if you think of it in a screenplay, which I do a lot, and I use plenty
Yes.
of analogies since I'm a filmophile, is in the movie you have the act two going into act three where it's like your darkest moment. All right, like everything is starting to kind of unravel at the seams. Everything's falling apart. You're starting to doubt the journey that you went through this entire act two and all the trials and tribulations. And it's like, all right, this is my crossroads moment. I have two choices now. I can just kind of wave the white towel and give up and just kind of accept, whatever mediocrity my life is going to entail. Or I can take the bull by the horns and figure out how I can get back to becoming the hero of my own story. So you did just that and you figure, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. It might have at one point, but it's no longer serving me. What can I do to get back to what energizes me and fuels me and gets me up every single day? And that's ultimately what I did as well, where I took stock of the different roles that I'd had
Hmm.
and realized pretty soon on the immediate through line of storytelling. So whether it be as a journalist, whether it be as even a teacher, a screenwriter, a salesperson, a trainer, in all of those capacities, if I didn't have a compelling story that resonated with my audience, it didn't matter what else I brought to the table. I could have all the bells and whistles in the world. I could be as qualified as anyone else, and I can have this clear understanding through my experience and knowledge of how to do something, but it's not going to click unless people can relate and identify. And sometimes that's that small piece. You can have everything else, and you can be, the most well-versed person when it comes to what you bring to the table, but it's still not going to make a difference if it completely goes over the head of your audience. If they can't feel like they can insert themselves into this story and say, okay, I get it. I can empathize. I can relate. I can compare to this. So that's the big thing for me is what can I do when I'm connecting with people that I'm working with to loop in some sort of anecdote, some sort of analogy, some sort of cross reference that makes them say, okay, yeah, you know what? This is relatable to that. And this is something that I can actually extract the lessons learned from this particular scenario, and then apply it to my own and achieve a very similar result.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such rich, uh, I don't know, an answer, an input, wisdom that you said, because a lot of people drown in that moment or moments of uncertainty. Which direction do I go? And they stay stymied and their business just stays as is. So you are a storyteller and you you are a storyteller. What if
But let
somebody,
me stop you right there, Michelle.
yes,
I just want to say, you say I'm a storyteller.
yes,
We're all storytellers.
okay,
Every
good.
single one of us has a story to tell and a very compelling one at that. It's just a matter of having the proper platform and the proper guidance and resources to be able to effectively share it.
Oh, I love that because that completely sets up my question.
Oh, go for it.
You kind of pre-answered it in a
There
way
you go.
because I'm going to ask you again. What if somebody comes to you and they say, "Yeah, I maybe need some branding, some rebranding. I don't have an interesting story. Nothing has ever happened to me. It's pretty boring. Nobody would relate to my boring life." How would you answer them? And you kind of just answered it, but expound on
Well,
that.
yes. First, I'd say we all are storytellers. We have some stories to share and yada, yada, yada. But the other thing that I would say is, and this is kind of counterintuitive to what they might expect me to say, is that well, honestly, your business is not about you,
Ooh,
right?
excellent.
It,
Yes.
it's not about you. And this is something that I learned in my time as a story brand certified guide and my time just kind of immersing myself into a lot of similar materials is that one of the biggest mistakes that we see in business
Mhm.
is that the business owners try to become the hero of their own story. And the
Yes.
reality is this, is that no one wants to do business with a hero because they want to be the hero. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Nobody cares how great you are until you can show them how great you can make them. So
Yes.
that's
Excellent.
the primary paradigm shift that I try to display for my clients and for people that I work with is to first take yourself out of the spotlight, at least initially, when we're talking about marketing and we're trying to put that message out there and realize why you got into the business in the first place. It wasn't, some self-serving type of reason. And if it was, then you're not long for it because eventually you'll be sniffed out. But the reality, ideally, and hopefully for most of us, is that because we wanted to serve others, because we feel like we have something that we can offer of value that's going to enrich the lives and livelihoods of those that we do serve. So knowing that, that's not a hero, that's a guide. Okay. So that's guide speak. So you're not Skywalker in this scenario, you're Yoda. Okay. So that means you're not necessarily the star of the film. You don't have the most lines, but you're technically the most important character because if Skywalker didn't have Yoda, Skywalker doesn't, defeat the Force and, and all that jazz. So, with that said, that's where we need to really start the examination process is who is your audience? Okay. What is their story? And then how can your backstory seamlessly integrate with their biggest issue? That's where you can show that know, like, and trust factor, or build that know, like, and trust factor by showing your relatability, by displaying some level of empathy and then transitioning into authority. So, for example, someone might come and say, "All right, well, I'm selling, widgets,
Mhm.
for lack of a better example, to my clients, and it's because if they don't have that widget in place, then all of a sudden the machinery that they're using is not going to be as efficient. And if they're not as efficient, they're not going to be able to scale and grow. Okay. Well, what I can do to help them is to tell them, well, listen, what is it about that widget that inspired you to create that? Okay, how did you go through a similar experience in life where you also came up short, you were inefficient, it cost you, business, or you had a whole bunch of fits and spurts, and have that story in your back pocket. Okay, but start with them. Okay, so the order of how you're hitting those beats is just as important as the substance that goes into those beats themselves. If you start with, let me tell you how I started my business and how I discovered this widget and then I created this and that and the other, that's all well and good, but most of your audience that is applicable is probably going to tune out because you haven't said anything about them and their issue yet.
Yes.
So knowing that there is a natural progression of the character, the world they live in, what they aspire to become,
Yeah.
because if we don't know what they want at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what type of pain or void they have, it's not going to correlate to what they ultimately want to achieve, which means that the pain is not going to be as significant as it needs to be for them to finally take action. If it's just kind of that small minor pain like we talked about before, they might just say, all right, I can live with this type of pain. It's not debilitating. I'll just be middle of the road. But if it's something that forces an existential crisis, a panic attack on your birthday, if you will, and you say, well, listen, I don't know how I can survive living in this state for the rest of my life unless I do something differently now,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter what you bring to the table. Once again,
Yeah.
they're not going to bite because you have not taken those components and specifically put it into a world that is going to really kind of resonate with them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. And I think I think customers, clients, prospective customers and clients, they know authenticity. They can sense it with their spidey senses. They can sense it if you're authentic and you're really passionate about having them as the hero. You are not going to start a phone call with, "Hi, I want to make you the hero of your own story." You're, you
Mhm.
know, and you're going to
Yeah.
weave it in, but I think potential clients and customers can sense if you're authentic because you come from a place of passion with you love what you do. You know your business, and we're going to
Mhm.
talk about Brandscribed in a few seconds, but do you think that do you have to know? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask. Do you have to know everything about that customer so I'm going to sound authentic instead of, okay, I'm going to take imperfect action and do it,
Yeah.
knowing
Well,
that the customers can sense in you know,
yeah,
in
it's a
your
fair question.
authenticity.
It's a very fair question, Michelle, because one, I mean, authenticity is being craved now more than ever before. We're living in a society where so many people have their guard up and
Yeah.
they are just, really afraid of leaving themselves vulnerable because they don't know whom to trust anymore.
Yeah.
So, for you to be able to figure out a way to let their guard down, to become your authentically truest version of yourself
Yeah.
is more than half the battle. But with that said, yeah, to answer the initial question there, Michelle, the more you know about your audience, the better off you are. I mean, if you know, all right, these are their buying habits, these are their fears, this is what keeps them up at night, then yeah, use that to your advantage. Now, that second part of your question, do we should we still take some imperfect action in order to keep the ball moving? Absolutely. Yeah. If we're trying to wait for that perfect moment where, all right, you know what? I'm still not, I'm only 85% sure of my ideal client avatar. So I'm going to hold out on launching this because I need to figure out that extra 15%. You're going to be holding out for a really long time. You're going to be stuck in a situation like I was for many years where it's like, well, you know what? Um, I'm just going to continue to stay where I'm at until I can figure this part out. It's this like this stubbornness that I had with me. It's like, well, I'm not ready to take the leap and completely make this pivot off in another direction until I can tie up these loose ends. Well, some loose ends are not meant to be tied. Sometimes you just got to keep moving forward with loose ends attached to you until that discovery is made along the way. Because you never know when that's going to happen. So, by all means, especially in the beginning stages, it's imperative for you to fail forward and for you to have some trial and error, figure out what connects with your audience, what doesn't, beta testing things, surveying the people that you know how you have the best relationships with, and get it straight from them. But it's a work in progress that requires many iterations, and that's the same thing as any story, if you think about it. Because, I used to tell my students when I taught writing, they call it a draft for a reason, because you got to breeze through it, you know, get to the end of that draft, breeze through, then go back, see what types of golden nuggets you left along the way, collect those, and then build from there and continue to have that evolution, if you will, even if it's a two steps forward, one step back type of scenario,
Yeah.
you're still moving forward. So you need to kind of accept that as part of the perfect imperfections that are required for you to build your brand.
Oh, that's so good. That's just golden nuggets because I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. It just I can't the analysis of paralysis, the
Oh my
paralysis
goodness.
of
So real.
analysis, I think it is. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so they
Yes.
won't do anything because they have to know every single thing. And like you said, that's valuable. That is
Hmm.
absolutely necessary, but they won't start that business. They won't start that book. They won't start until everything is aligned. And it's just like that's the same thing as okay, when you're married, we're not going to have kids until the whole perfect scenario. Well,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
as a parent, you know that if you wait for everything to be perfect, those kids
Yep.
would not have come.
No, I'd be childless. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yes. So,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah.
always talked about, well, we had need to be at a certain income level. We need to be in a certain housing situation. But, and obviously those things are important. I'm not
Yes.
going to diminish that you do want to bring children into a world as comfortably as possible and give them every possible opportunity to succeed. But at the same time, there are certain things that you're gonna figure out on the fly. You need to
Yeah.
trust that you are strong enough and you are capable enough to figuring things out. And
Yeah.
Michelle, if nothing else, maybe what we can do on this podcast that can be the biggest takeaway here is
Mhm.
dispel the myth of failure that has been ingrained within our society.
Yeah.
We need to destigmatize the term of failure because there is no success without failing. Period.
Yes. Woohoo.
Hard stop. So, with that said, I want to encourage all of your listeners to embrace
Yeah.
failing forward because whether it's writing a story, whether it's rebranding your business, whether it's scaling your operations, if you continue to allow this fear of failing to get in your way, well, here's the irony you already have.
Yeah.
Okay. But the problem with failing by doing nothing is that there's nowhere to go after that.
Yes.
If you fail by doing something, well, guess what? In life, you either win or you learn. So if you lost there, that's a lesson that you can now incorporate into the next iteration of whatever you do. But doing nothing gets you nowhere.
Yeah. And that guarantees failure if you do
Guarantees
nothing.
it.
And I
Yes.
know the founder of Spanx, and she's famous for saying this, Sarah Blakely, said when
Mhm.
she was growing up, when they were sitting around the dinner table, her dad would ask her and her siblings, "What did you fail at today?" And
Love it.
she said it destigmatized failing. It was a regular conversation. So, you try this little, Spanx thing, that maybe women might like,
Yeah.
and you're a multimillionaire because you weren't afraid of failing. So
Yeah.
that is
Which comes full
so,
circle too to what we were discussing before with the hero's journey is
yeah,
if the hero of your story is infallible, is perfect, no one's going to buy into that character. It's not going to be a very interesting character at all. That's
yeah,
why Superman had his kryptonite. That's why Batman had all his villains. It's
yes,
like all these superheroes that might seem perfect from the surface are far from it. They have many imperfections, and that's why we love them because we can relate. They're fallible just like us. So if you can put something out there that actually reveals, all right, well, this is how we fell short. This is how I missed the mark. And this is what you can learn from that experience. Now, all of a sudden, you've captivated an audience in a new way that's going to be extremely valuable.
yeah, absolutely. Now, all this passion that you have for rebranding and storytelling and all this, was that the impetus for starting Brandscribed. And why
Absolutely.
did you start Brandscribed?
Yeah, for all the reasons of the story that I'd shared already is that I had my crossroads moments and I realized that I strayed far off course from where I intended to go in my career originally. Not to say that there weren't some very fulfilling moments along the way, but it didn't feel fluid to me. It didn't feel like those dots connected. So when I did look back and identified that obvious through line as storytelling, that's when that light bulb went off and said, all right, there are certain elements of the different roles that I'd had that I absolutely loved and absolutely embraced. But in a vacuum, each one of those separately wasn't fulfilling enough. So,
Yeah,
what can I do to take the initiative in my own hands and create this hybrid type of business, if you will, that extracted all the fun, purposeful, fulfilling types of things and experiences that I had had in those roles and turned it into one essential business. So, as mentioned, as a journalist, I always loved being able to ask questions and get to the root of the matter, get to the thesis of the story, and so I'm still a why guy, and that's something that is still prevalent in my day-to-day role in Brandscribed. I was a teacher. I loved being able to simplify seemingly complex
yeah,
topics and materials and get that aha moment from my students. So I still do that. So when it comes to helping my clients tell their story, I have a done with you type of coaching where I'm essentially holding their hand every step along the way. Again, asking questions to get to that teachable moment and then allowing them to now use these newfound abilities and resources that they discovered and then take it upon themselves. And I've always loved to tell the stories. So whether it be as a screenwriter, as a journalist, I love the structure of something that you can just kind of put the puzzle pieces together. As a kid, I
yes.
was, those were my favorite types of games. Is just kind of finding the puzzle pieces or filling in the missing words or whatever the case might be. And I get to do that when I work with my done for you clients. They say, all right, here's my story. Here's all the organized chaos.
Yeah.
Can you put it into something that actually is going to have a message and it's going to really connect with my audience? And I love that. And then the sales component, well, any business owner needs to have some sort of sales aptitude or you're not going to get too far in life. So that remains tried and true as well, where I can take those things that I would teach my sales teams in the past and that I would incorporate myself, and it still has a purpose in what I'm doing right now. So it's all kind of come together because of this seemingly disjointed past that didn't seem to make much sense to me in the moment, but then looking back, again, there were lessons to be had that have set me up nicely for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in your LinkedIn, if I recall, your LinkedIn profile, you said you used the words transform, I think it was. And
Mm-hmm.
I just thought when I think of transform, I think of transition. So do you
Mm-hmm.
consider yourself in constant transition to be a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday, tomorrow than you were today?
Yeah, otherwise, what's the point of it all, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if we're not constantly trying to figure out how we can continue to grow as human beings, then at some point we're going to reach a level of stagnancy where we're not going to feel fulfilled ourselves. So, I have my daily habits that I continue to fall back on every single day.
Yeah.
There's 10 daily habits that I've been doing ever since my crossroads moment that to this point, there's enough of a sample size where if I go 10 for 10, if I'm not guaranteed to have a great day, I'm at least guaranteed not to have a bad one. So by following kind of that type of framework, and I'm a big framework guy, whether it be developing screenplays, writing stories, etc. Same thing with my life. If I stay that course, then there's always those opportunities every single day for me to build off of what I've already created for myself up until that point and become a better version of myself. And that's inspiring. And that's what motivates me every day is that if I fall short with something, if I get rejected, if I come up, just a little bit off where I wanted to be, I still know that I have an ultimate game plan that's going to get me to where I want to go as long as I continue to follow my script that I created for myself.
Exactly. Oh, that's so great. So what if a company wants to has listened to what you have had to say and they've maybe, okay, let's go check out his LinkedIn profile, let's check out his website, and they think, yeah, you know what? I think we could learn from this guy who knows a little something about about a
Little
couple of
something.
things.
Uh-huh.
So how would people get in touch with you? Where are
Sure.
you on social media? Tell us where to find you.
Well, everyone knows we're on LinkedIn now. We've talked about it, and
Isn't
that's,
everybody? Yeah.
yes, and it was the beginning of a wonderful relationship here. So come join the fun. Reach out to me,
Yeah.
connect with me, become a part of my network. And hey, if I'm not for you, perhaps there's somebody within my circle that is that I can pass along. So it really is a no-lose situation. You can find me on my website, as you had indicated. It's www.brandscribed.com. So like transcribed, but with a B, where you can book a absolutely free consultation call where we can get to know each other. I can learn a little bit more about your story, your audience, where you want to go, and what's keeping you from getting there, and see if there could be some alignment from there. And like I said, it might not be. I might not be the guide to your hero, but if nothing else, we'll be able to create a new friendship, figure out where we can link up in other ways, and I get to hear another story. So that always works for me. I love hearing my share of stories. So I look forward to hearing yours too.
Oh, I love that, Jeff. Okay. And Jeff told me before we came on, we have to go now, even though this will not be aired right at this moment, but he has a very important engagement to keep. His daughter is 13 years old, and so he has a very important milestone birthday to go to. So, Jeff, I am not going
Yes.
to hold you. I'm
Oh, no
so
worries.
thankful that you were here today and able to drop some gold nuggets into our lives.
I appreciate that. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure, Michelle. I totally appreciate the relationship and friendship that we've forged. And yeah, as you mentioned, I can't wait. We have our monumental crabs and cookies celebration now with my newly formed teenager. And I'm looking forward to that story tonight as well.
Absolutely. That is a great story in progress.
Exactly.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jeff. And until next time, thank you for watching another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.